Hello everyone, welcome to Storage Day. I'm Cami Novelli-Killeen. I'm the Director of Product Management for Amazon Elastic Block Store. I'm thrilled to join Storage Day today. It is our 5th edition, and it's a very special one this year because we're celebrating 15 years since we launched EBS, the very first high-performance block storage in the cloud. I'm here today with Matt Garman, our Senior Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Global Services. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you today, inviting you for Storage Day, is that you were one of the very first people to work on EBS. Back in the day.
Yep.
In fact, I've heard that you're actually, you started working on EBS doing your business school internship in 2005. Is that true?
It's when we started thinking about it, yes. But I really started working on EBS. I interned in 2005, came back full-time in 2006, and I was kind of product manager for all of AWS. And then one of the first areas that I focused on was for EBS, and I actually hired the first set of engineers to launch the EBS service. We wrote the document that was internal document on kind of what the product would do and how we think about it. And I was the GM for launching the service way back in 2007, and it's been or 2008, I guess. It's been a fun ride.
It's been a fun and long ride.
Yeah.
The service has grown quite a bit. You've stayed pretty close to EBS your entire time here. And there were a lot of innovation that went into EBS and EC2 and networking. And it's been quite the journey. Can you believe it's been 15 years?
Yeah, it has. It's incredible. And it's, I think back to when we were first thinking about it. And part of what we were trying to think about is, actually a lot of people thought we were crazy when we were first thinking about the EBS service. But, we launched EC2 and there was only local storage. That was it.
Yeah.
There was just local storage. And a lot of folks were saying, look, I need storage that I can scale independently from compute. And so we took that as a challenge and we went back and thought about what could that look like and could we come up with, originally we thought of, hey, maybe we could have separate disks that people could attach, but people actually wanted more flexibility than that. And so we kind of, in traditional Amazon ways of thinking, we thought big and we said, could we have flexible storage where it's down to a gigabyte of storage up to really, really large sets of storage that we could attach, and in a cloud environment, right? Not in a traditional SAN environment, but really making it a true distributed cloud environment. And so that's what we tried to go build, and it was pretty fun, and we were able to do it.
I have some new stats for you. Ready?
Okay.
So as of this year, every single day, we're processing over 100 trillion IOs every day.
Yeah. I have a good stat for you. Is when we launched the service, we were designing it, and we were trying to think about how big could the service get, and we built a special network originally for EBS way back in the day, and we built it such that we couldn't actually ever imagine that EBS would be ever bigger than 10 racks of capacity. And so what we did is we decided to take that and double it. So we made the network so it could support 20 racks of capacity, which, really is only several, tens of terabytes of capacity or something very small now. In retrospect, seemed quite silly, but at the time, that's how we were thinking about it because AWS was obviously much smaller back then too.
Yeah,
so it's crazy to hear some of those. That is... It's bonkers.
It is crazy to think of the scale of the service today, and it's hard to imagine the kinds of conversations and trade-offs that you had to make back in the day. One of my favorite stories I've heard, I've been talking to a lot of people about the launch days and origins of AWS, and one of my favorite stories is about the heated debates you had when, you and the team had about whether we could launch EC2 with just direct attached storage that was ephemeral, or should we wait and launch EC2 with EBS?
Yeah. We EC2 when we first launched EC2 was really feature poor, and we weren't sure that it was going to be useful for anybody. Actually, it was we didn't support Windows. We didn't have even static IP addresses. Every time you'd launch, you'd have a different IP address. Yeah. There was no persistent storage. There was no load balancing, there was no auto scaling, there was no anything to it. And we were just like, all right, we're going to let people, there was one size, right? There's an instance, which back was originally an M1 small instance. And that was it. It was one size instance. And we launched it, and it took off. People were super excited. And then it quickly ran into problems where we had to then go add all of those things. And block storage is one of those. People were like, telling us, like, we'd really love to run databases on you, but we need more reliable storage than local disks.
Yeah.
And that was one of the super obvious use cases where, like, of course you want to run databases. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And, yep, that makes, we have to go build that thing. And so
Yeah.
that's what we did. Yeah.
So we had a good starting point, but we didn't really know how the service was going to evolve, who our customers were going to be, what they were going to use the service for,
Yep.
right? And it was the very first time we had block storage in the cloud.
Yep.
The cloud itself was very new. People were still trying to grapple with that concept.
Yeah.
And so over the years, customers have invented many new ways to build on top of EBS. How have you seen these use cases and challenges evolve over time?
Yeah, I think, look, when we were starting, it was really just a way for you to have permanent storage attached to your instance that would survive independently from the instance. And I think that was super important for us to support, basic databases. As we've grown, it has turned out to be a critical building block for almost every style of application that people want to move on to us, whether it's super high-end databases or SAP systems or medical, records or really kind of any use case you can think about. And the range of applications, we've had to, and you all, and have been driving features and functionality and performance and consistency and capabilities that we could never have really imagined back in the day. And when we first launched, I remember actually it was probably a month or two before we launched, we didn't have any features, right? It was just going to be, that was it. You had a block storage and you could get 1 gigabyte to, I think 100 gigabytes was maybe the max you could get. I can't remember exactly the max size, but it wasn't huge.
Yeah,
and
1 terabyte, I
1
think.
terabyte?
Yeah.
Oh, that may have been later. I'm not sure we supported 1 terabyte
1
right away.
gigabyte to 1 terabyte,
Maybe it was
I
1
don't know.
terabyte. But just a few months, like maybe a month or two before we launched, someone's like, what if people don't want to keep that around and they want to save a copy of that? And so we actually launched snapshots as a last minute add to the to EBS. Is we're like, somebody may want to save one of the 2 of those or be able to go back a version or something like that. And so we actually created snapshots in the last month or two before launch.
We had S3, so that was convenient.
That's right. Well, yes, we obviously built on S3.
Yeah. So many things have changed over the last 15 years. A few things have not, right? Security, availability, durability, those have stayed table stakes for us over the years.
Yep.
And we've built them into the service. We'll continue to do so. It's such a core part of our culture on the team. But there are other customer requirements that weren't so obvious, right? Today we have millions of customers on EBS. They each have their very own unique requirements for using the service. As you mentioned, we built snapshots. Originally, it was for the backup use case, but it's evolved to something, a core part of data protection strategy for customers today. And we've created different volume types. But these things that seem obvious in hindsight, they weren't
that
obvious.
I think, look, even some of the core pieces we think about like reliability and consistency and performance. When we think about reliability, when we launched EBS, our goal was that an EBS volume would have the durability of a single disk, right? That it was and look, it was striped across multiple disks, so we had to replicate it, but effectively we wanted to deliver the durability of what people would expect of a disk.
Yeah.
And so we launched that, and EBS volumes would fail somewhat frequently. And it turns out customers are like, no, it needs to be much better than a single disk. And it was a surprise for us. We were like, oh, really? But you live with disks in the data center, and it turns out our customers don't like living with disks in the data center. They don't really want their volumes to fail, rarely, if ever. And so we had to adjust on that. I think another area that we really learned and that's on the durability and availability aspect, was performance. And we always knew that people would want faster and faster disks. That's not surprising, right? And SSDs were a huge win for us on that front. But one of the things that really surprised us was we always knew IOPS were going to be important for customers, was the consistency of the performance. That was something that we would look at our graphs and we would see that the performance is pretty consistent across all of our IOPS, and we'd still have customers complaining. And they were looking at their super tail latencies, like their P99999 latency IOPS, where something in the system, whether it was network latency or something like that, would be higher than they would expect, and it was causing issues for these traditional applications that people were moving into the cloud. And so we spent a lot of time. Actually, we built new types of monitoring. We built new types of compliance measurements, et cetera, looking at how do we make sure that we would continually improve that tail latency, because that mattered to customers. And I think now we've got those down so low that that's rarely an issue anymore for customers.
Yeah, and we keep investing in it.
Yeah, because it's not enough that we stop. We never stop.
Yeah, we never stop. And their idea of all reliability means keeps evolving, and performance, the demands keep increasing. And innovating at this scale and at this pace is not an easy feat. So what is the culture behind what makes that possible?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Number one is just always listening to customers. I think Jeff Bezos had a saying that look, one of the great things about customers is they're perpetually dissatisfied.
Love that saying.
Right? It's a fantastic saying because it's always true. Even when you launch something that customers think is awesome, you only have to wait about 6, 9, maybe 12 months until customers tell you how they would like it to be better. Yeah. Sometimes right away, but oftentimes it's a little bit later. Yeah. And take an example that we launched with GP2, which was one of our first SSD-based volumes, and customers loved it. It was fantastic, and we weren't sure exactly how we were gonna, and it had a lot more IOPS than many of our other platforms had, but you had to, when you wanted more IOPS, you had to launch a bigger volume, right? And so instead of and there was a consistent ratio, right? Yeah. So you would launch 100 gigabytes and you'd get X number of IOPS, and then if you wanted twice as many, you'd have to have 200 gigabytes. And customers were like, this is incredible. I can get much better, consistent, faster performance than ever before. And then pretty quickly they came back to us and said, you know what? It's annoying that I'm wasting all of this storage. And you'd explain to them that you're provisioning it and whether you use IOPS or actual storage, like you're still using it. And customers are like, I don't want to waste all of this storage. And so we don't say, no, you're wrong. Remember, you liked this 3 weeks ago. Yeah. We say, that's great. And we learned. And a couple of years later, we launched GP3, where you can now provision storage and IOPS independently, and customers are like, great, and then they move on to the next thing. And so customers are constantly coming back and telling us, I love what you did there, I'd love for you to change here. Yeah. And sometimes on different dimensions, sometimes it's new workloads emerge, right? Sometimes we'll learn that on new generative AI workloads or new container workloads or other things like that, customers are looking for different capabilities or different performance or different aspects of what they're looking for in a service, and so they'll give us that feedback. And I think one of the great things about Amazon is we listen to that feedback and try to get better. Yeah,
that's so true. And I think listening to the feedback, and not just that, but also understanding the outcome that the customer is trying to achieve, because that evolves also as their business changes, right? And oftentimes we end up inventing something together. You mentioned GP3 and GP2. One of my very favorite features of EBS is elastic volumes, which customers are using all the time, including to move from GP2 to GP3 today. But back when we launched EBS, the real value proposition advantage we were proposing was unlimited storage, but you can buy it in small increments, right? And then a few years later, that wasn't enough.
It turns out the customers don't really like managing LVM stripe sets, as it turns out, so they wanted us to do that for them. It's not super surprising.
And even more flexibility, elastic volume, single API call, you can tier between different volume types.
That's right. Yeah, I remember when we used to say there's no need for that because customers can just launch another volume and stripe across them. But that was a lot of work, and they had to manage that, and then Elastic Volumes was a huge innovation. It was great.
It was huge, and to this day I still talk to customers, and they're just amazed. And back then, I mean, it wasn't something even conceivable with on-premises storage or even other cloud providers, and we had to invent how to build it even. So what's your favorite example of listening to customer feedback, evolving the product to match?
Yeah, those are a couple of good ones that you mentioned. And I think this one highlights also our customer focus, which is we launched snapshots, like I said, when we launched EBS at the very beginning. So we've always had the idea of snapshots, saving them as backups to S3, with the idea that, if you ever needed to recover or do something like that, you'd have that available. And as we saw, customers started using those to actually use them as archives, right? And so I think there's Johnson & Johnson has a use case published where they had 100,000 EBS snapshots of kind of their various kind of medical records or pieces like that they actually have to save for a long time. And so it's monotonically growing number of snapshots for them. And that cost was getting really expensive. And look, it's nothing we ever imagined, and S3 is a very cost-effective backend for us, and so we were saying, okay, what could we do there? And so we came up with a way to archive snapshots. And a couple of things on that. Number one is thinking about, okay, customers are using a feature in a way that we didn't expect, and we're okay with that, and we embrace that and lean into it and say, great, good idea, you can still archive that, and we'll make that easy for you, and we'll have archive policies, and so that we can even automate that archiving for you. But also as a way to help customers lower their bill, because it turns out that was becoming really expensive for them. And I think that's another of the things that I love about the team, is that we listen to customers, we understand what their use case is, and we help them find ways to lower their cost of running in AWS so that they can afford to innovate and lean in and do more things on us. And so, I think that's one of my favorite examples, not because it's particularly amazing that you archive stuff like that, but it's a good example of where not many other technology vendors are proactively going and looking at how they can reduce their customer bills, and that we were just as excited about that innovation as something else that would drive additional revenue for us.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we're seeing it's huge with customers that have compliance requirements where they have to keep snapshots for 5-7 years. It's a great way to lower their bill, for sure.
Yep.
So a lot's changed with what customers are expecting of us and asking from us. But as you mentioned, block storage is still so foundational in AWS. Virtually every EC2 use case uses block storage. And as we have evolved the service over the years, what are some of your most important learnings that you could share and all customers can benefit from?
Never gets old, listening to customers. Customers will tell you, and you have to sometimes listen kind of underneath the thing that they're telling you, but they will tell you that the tail latency matters, or they will tell you that I want to keep this storage, but I need it to be in a cheaper place so that I can afford to keep it all. They will tell you about new use cases, right? Of I need fast attach times, or I need fast storage, or I need it for this particular use case or this particular use case. And I think being willing to say, okay, the thing that I delivered before used to be great, but it's, not getting married to your product, but saying, great, it'll keep evolving and getting better, I think is one of those learnings that applies to a lot of different things. I think the last one that I think that is an interesting learning is, and it's one that we've embraced in AWS, but it is the value of being able to build on top of the different building blocks too. And I think the EBS team in particular has really embraced being a low-level building block that other services can then build on top of and build other stuff in. And so EBS is embedded in a lot of other services that we offer inside of AWS, where those those new services in AWS don't ever have to think about, maybe I have to think about offering block storage, right? They're just like, yep, it's there, it works fine. Even EC2 for that matter, right? You can't boot an EC2 volume without, or EC2 instance without an EBS volume anymore. So, I think those are really important learnings, and it's fun to see it grow, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So 15 years, but as we say, it's still day one.
It is still day one, I know. And honestly, I think there is just as much innovation over the next 15 years as there is over the first 15. We solved a lot of interesting problems over the first 15 years. EBS is a great service that never existed before. We get just as excited about enabling customer use cases as our own internal technology. And as I look at all of the things that customers are out there building on top of us today, it's really impressive. People are building trading platforms, they're building health systems, they're building generative AI applications, they're building small blogs where it's a student in their dorm room. It's really kind of the breadth of large enterprises to governments to small startups building on top of these technologies. And so that's the other fun thing, is that we'll also get to seeing that innovation happen and enabling that. If there's anything I'm sure of, it's that a lot of those new innovations and requests will drive new use cases for us.
For sure. We're just scratching the surface, and that's the fuel that keeps us going, inventing on behalf of customers. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt. This is a great conversation. I could spend all day talking about the early days of EBS and AWS and the things we've built for customers, but I'm actually going to let our teams dive into this in the sessions that we have upcoming this afternoon. Before we wrap up, though, I want to take a moment to say a big thank you to our customers. On behalf of everyone here on the EBS team, thank you for trusting us with your data. We're very much looking forward to the next 15 years of innovating with you. And next up, we're going to hear from a longtime customer, Stripe.
Great.
They've been growing with us for the most part of the last 15 years. So thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of Storage Day.